Can you imagine that there was once a time when being a geek or nerd was not popular? I can. I actually remember those days. Well, look at me now. Not much has changed. But back then, it was almost a dream for the nerd to become the cool guy. Well, this is 2002's The New Guy. Spoiler alert, while I might be giving you my opinion on the film, that's no substitute for watching it for yourself. Links to the film are in the description. And for those of you that need to hear this is just a movie. All stunts are for the sake of story and shouldn't be attempted on your own. Viewer discretion is advised. We start off in a prison, and the guards are escorting Luther to the visitor center. And he tells his visitor that Dizzy's story is actually his story. He takes us back in Dizzy's childhood to show the audience that Dizzy definitely had an interesting style while growing up. Dizzy slides around in his living room while impersonating James Brown, while in nothing but an afro wig, shiny boxers, and crew socks. It's not hard to tell that Dizzy's definitely going to grow up to be a dork, but I'm more impressed by the actor's actual James Brown impression. He definitely does a better job than I could've. Points to the kid. As time passes, we see Dizzy and his friends on the first day of senior year, and he's just dorkier than ever. Dizzy and his friends get driven to school by Bear, but Kirk feels like they're just insignificant blips in the timeline of the world. Classic senior year contemplating going on here. Bear assures them that it's never too late for a change though. Once they get to school, Dizzy steps out to take a football to the face. Nearby, Dizzy spots Tina having trouble with her car, and he thinks that he has a chance. Kirk, Glenn, and Nora don't think he has a chance, but Dizzy's motivated. Dizzy marches right over, and he manages to help her with her car. Tina remembers the prank they pulled on Dizzy the year before, when they tied him to a chair and made him wear rubber breasts. Dizzy thinks that it's so sweet she actually remembers that, and he moves on to ask if she'd want to drink a coffee near him. Eventually, he gets Tina to touch him with a single finger, but just then, the jocks point out the pip tent that he's sporting downstairs. The jocks rip his underwear off and throw them on his head. Well, an elderly teacher mistakes it for a loaded weapon, and she grabs it to lead him to the principal. Dizzy tries to rip himself out of her iron grip, but he ends up seriously injuring himself instead. The principal calls Bear in, and she tries to tell him that Dizzy has Tourette syndrome. After sending him away with some new medication, Dizzy feels like he can't go back to school after breaking his little buddy. Suddenly, Dizzy hears gospel music being sung throughout the mall, and he takes the mic for the priest, and he preaches about how being himself is the best form of abstinence. Well, it turns out that he was arrested for this little scene, and he wakes up in a cell with Luther, who's giving him the crazy eyes. The two of them bond over the fact that they've been tied up to a chair with fake rubber breasts. Is this a common thing? Are there people out there that just have a pair of these rubber things laying around for a rainy day? Don't answer that question. Luther tells Dizzy that he was at the bottom at his last prison. But after getting kicked out, he started fresh at this one as the scary new guy. He decides to get kicked out of school to start fresh at a new one. When he goes back to school, he starts to break all of the rules, so he gets kicked out. All his antics do is get him another year at the same school. So he resorts to extreme measures. He takes a mop handle and he snaps it in front of the principal. That gets him expelled. After that, he decides to visit Luther and his friends in prison to get some prison yard lessons on how to be the crazy new guy in charge. Then it comes time for the new high school. His friends come to pick him up and the penitentiary truck pulls up. The guards open up the back and they unleash the new and improved and dangerous Dizzy. The guards wish him good luck, and Dizzy shows off his new style. Dizzy heads to the schoolyard and he tries to find the biggest, baddest kid to knock out. When he finds his target, he makes sure the whole school sees what he's about to do, but he underestimates the guy. He gets punched right off of the steps. After the bell rings, Dizzy comes back up and he pulls out his dirty fight tactics he learned to knock out the kid. When he realizes that no one's around to see what he did, he drags the guy into the school to try and show everyone inside, but all the classroom doors close once he's in there. He's not wrong. It's kind of hearsay if you do it without any witnesses around. You've really got to get an audience if you're going to have any sort of credibility. At this point, you've got to stay committed to the cause. Points to Dizzy for sticking with it. After school, Dizzy sits on top of the social tower, and the cheer members show up to give him the welcome mat. Danielle comes over with her friends to invite him to a party, but Dizzy walks off after setting the statue behind him on fire. After school, Dizzy goes home to play with the band, and they can't wait to hear about how well his first day as the new guy went. When they talk about him showing up at the party tonight, Kirk agrees to let Dizzy ride his dad's vintage racing bike to the party, but he ends up crashing it into the garage door. At the party, we see that Courtney actually got Tony Hawk to show up at the party, but Dizzy ends up showing him up by jumping the ramp on the racing bike. Finally, Courtney shows up and asks him if he wants to take her clothes off with his teeth. There was no way that Dizzy was going to say anything other than yes. While he ends up saying nothing at all, she still takes him up to the roof. After she pulls out the syrup, he disappears by rolling off the roof. That's how you know she's ready for anything. She brought the bottle of syrup with her, If someone brings a bottle of syrup to anywhere but IHOP, then this is why. Courtney ends up thinking that he blew her off, and Dizzy gets even more cred when word of that gets around. He goes to leave the party, and the only way his bike ends up leaving is because Kirk hooked it up with a tow cable and plays motor sounds on a boombox so everyone thinks that Dizzy's still cool. All the way home, Dizzy celebrates almost getting laid. And I can appreciate the fact that that's a moment to be celebrating. This is definitely his crowning moment. What makes it even funnier is that he comes home to find that his old guidance counselor is waiting to talk with him in Bear, and she thinks that his new attitude and appearance is because of the Tourette's and the crank. Wow. The next day at school, Danielle tries to call him out on some things, but she ends up being way off the mark. She tries to get him to come up to the football game so that other people will show up, and he graciously accepts. When he shows up, he finds that he's one of the only people in the stands, and he spots Danielle and Courtney on the cheer squad. Dizzy tries to come up with a way to rally the team and crowd, and he decides to put on a little war skit. After a motivational speech, he rides off the field on a white horse, and the football game resumes. Amazingly, the speech was good enough to motivate the team to win their first game since the first Bush was president. Did you guess that him showing up as a favor to Danielle was enough for him to steal her away from the school jock? Well, of course you did, that's how the stories go. The next day, Dizzy goes shopping with Danielle, and he watches as she tries on swimsuits and dances for him. Dizzy's so grateful for this experience, and they go shopping for music afterwards. She gets spotted by a friend, Emily, and she tells Dizzy about how they just aren't friends anymore after she started dating the old jock. Just then, Dizzy's band members show up, and he acts like he doesn't know them. At school, Dizzy gets called into the school office, and the coach and principal scare him for a moment, talking about the horse cleanup. In the end, it all leads up to them being so happy that he did all of that since it led to the team winning their first game in years. They ask him what else they could do to motivate the team, and he mentions better music. Again, I want to point out that things don't go this easily. Dizzy heads to the band's garage, and he tells them that he has them headlining the homecoming game now. He apologizes for acting like a jerk, and everything's forgiven. But it's not that simple. You don't just forget and move on like that. In a perfect world, yeah, but we live in this one. At school, Dizzy shows kindness to the midget tuba player, and he shows that everyone's equal whether a geek, goth, cowboy, or prep. Danielle goes down to the geeks, finds Emily, apologizes, and they hug. Again, the turnaround for these people is ridiculous. Let's just say it's for the sake of pacing in the movie. The hierarchy of the school changes, and the football team keeps winning over time. Dizzy even brings his band to the school to introduce the guys to Courtney. Life at high school has never been so good, and Dizzy spends some time with his dad who just quit his job and sold the house to spend more time with him. Bear promises that he'll follow Dizzy to college in the motorhome he just bought. Later, Dizzy heads to a saloon to find Danielle riding the bull, and he tries to tell her what he's been hiding this whole time. She ends up telling him that she doesn't care about his past, but when she mentions that they're going to be facing his old high school for the finals, he tries to tell her that he can't go to that game. Well, not only does he go thanks to the motivation of Danielle, he goes as the scene from Braveheart. Fantastic. This is cinema at its finest. In an amazing showdown, Dizzy's new school ends up winning the championship, and the crowd goes absolutely wild. Coach gives Dizzy the game-winning ball, and the crowd goes wild once again. Meanwhile, one of the players on the other team seems to recognize Dizzy as he holds up the ball. Afterwards, Dizzy and the others go back to school to celebrate, and the player from the other team comes over to call out Dizzy. Dizzy makes his way to the front of the crowd, and the player tells him that he's got a bone to pick with him. Dizzy stands his ground and gets ready to fight. But suddenly, all of the other classmates jump in to stand up for Dizzy. When it's all said and done, Danielle's ex shows up and asks the player to tell him everything he knows about Dizzy. This sounds about right too. I'm glad there's at least one bad guy left around. There wouldn't be much of a story if everyone became woke in their senior year. Later that night, Dizzy and his band get ready to play for the homecoming celebration. But they find out that the other high school showed up thanks to flyers that had been handed out. Well, they go to play anyways, and they play a fantastic cover of Play That Funky Music White Boy until Danielle's ex takes over the show to show who Dizzy really is. After hearing this, the crowd goes crazy trying to find out the truth. And Dizzy tries to explain until Luther, the prison mates, and Warden show up to silence the crowd. He explains how he made himself someone others would like, but the crowd doesn't want to hear it. Needless to say, what's terrifying is seeing Luther and the tuba midget walking around with fake breasts and duct tape. Backstage, Nora tells Dizzy that he's inspired her to tell someone how she truly feels, and she grabs Glenn to make out with him. Surprisingly, Danielle shows up backstage, and she tells Dizzy that she went through a transformation like that too. Now she is who she is, and it's thanks to Dizzy. And the two of them kiss. Then the curtains part, and they see the two bullies tied to chairs on the stage with fake breasts on them. Then we see that Luther has actually been saying all of this to David Hasselhoff. And the credits roll. Comedy has never gotten better than the early 2000s films about teens finding their place in the world with a perfect punk rock soundtrack. That'll always get me, and it will never get better than that. Give it a shot. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.